Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast. The songs and stories of a music icon.
For this special episode of Electric Friends, I'm in conversation with none other than Ade Fenton. So, Ade, thanks so much for appearing on the podcast.
My pleasure, Tom.
So, first, I just wanted to go right back to the start, I guess. So, way before you first teamed up with Gary Numan. So, I know your first records in the late 90s were techno. But what music did you sort of surround yourself with as a youth? And when did you first realise this was a thing that you wanted to do?
Probably the same as every other Numanoid, really. Our friends Electric on Top of the Pops, you know, and being at school, going into school the next day, like, you know, did you see that guy? Did you see that robot on Top of the Pops last night? You know, I said this in an interview recently, actually, that I don't know why that particular sound sparked something in my brain, but you know, just that electronic sound. You know, I sort of grew up in a house where, you know, my parents were playing Shawaddy Waddy and Cliff Richard and all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? So, and then just to see and hear him on Top of the Pops, and then that really sparked my love of electronic music at a young age. And then I started to sort of source things like John Fox's Metamatic, the early Human League albums before Dare, you know, so like Travelogue Reproduction. And you know, that's kind of where it all started, you know. And I was a kind of fully fledged Numanoid, and you know, posters on the wall, all that kind of thing. And yeah, so obviously I'm sure we'll get onto this, but it makes it even sweeter that, you know, I'm kind of doing what I'm doing for a living now.
I think a lot of fans wouldn't necessarily realise that you were such a big fan of his already from a young age. So that's amazing that eventually.
Well, you know, still am. You know, I'm proud of it. You know, yeah, right from practically day one, and then of course, obviously after Top of the Pops, you then sort of look for the back catalogue as well, and you know, sort of went and got the 12-incher down in the park from somewhere, which I still have in the loft somewhere, and obviously the earlier Tubeway Army stuff. So you know, yes, I've got all the badges. Thank you.
And so, what were your first releases? Was it Fenton and Thomas? I was looking up on.
The techno side of it, yeah. I mean, I think they probably, you know, just to sort of preface that a little bit, is that, you know, I'd gotten into dance music, specifically techno, the few years before I started releasing music, and you know, going to raves and, you know, hearing a record at a rave that had the same effect on me as Our Friends Electric did back in 1979, you know, and it was like somebody was ripping the guts out of a synthesizer, and I just thought, you know, and on top of like this ridiculously hard kick drum and obviously all the fun that goes with going to a rave, you know, and so I'd met a girl who was trying to get into DJing, and she had some decks, and I just started messing around and thought, oh, this is quite easy. I quite like doing this. And, you know, the thing was that, you know, you can't just sort of go, hey, everyone, I'm a DJ, you know, and then expect to get bookings. You know, you sort of had to prove your worth really as a producer of that music. So with a guy called Tony Thomas, we made some stuff. He sort of showed me the basics. In fact, you know, it's down to him really that I kind of like got into making music in the first place. Well, not actually got into making it, but certainly enabled me to learn, you know, all of the bits and pieces. So that's kind of that was the first of the sort of techno releases. I think that was back in '98. I think.
And were you also remixing other artists as well before you
started
working with
No,
Gary?
not really. I just thought on the first record that I ever did, with a friend, I decided to set up a label. And back then, you know, 12 inches was selling thousands still. So I was just very lucky that the first one I did okay. And on the bottom and on the label, I just wrote, for DJ bookings, phone this number, and it was my phone number. and the phone started ringing and saying, "Oh, can we book you as a DJ?" And before you knew it, literally within 6 months, I'm Slovenia, Croatia, and Australia, South Africa, Brazil, all these different places, and that lasted for a good kind of 10 years until Gary and I started working together very kind of regularly.
And I was reading his autobiography, and it says when he first met you at his, I think his band gatherings in like the early noughties, he didn't necessarily maybe get on with you at first or like your music at first.
No,
So what do you remember from those days?
No, everybody asks me this. And no offense to you at all, because it is. I'm sure it's a curious thing for Gary Numan
Yeah.
fans to kind of know. But I was going through my Depeche Mode phase at the time, and in particular the devotional songs of faith and devotion look with the white vest and the long hair and the tattoos and that kind of stuff. And I think he thought he saw this guy kind of sitting there, in a white vest, thinking, "Who's this twat?" You know what I mean? And through a mutual friend who kind of managed to persuade him that I'm all right, just a bit shy, not actually cocky. And eventually I got invited to a party at Gary's house, and that's kind of how we got to be friends, really. And I think maybe like the third or fourth party, I'd started working on some industrial sort of sounding music rather than the techno stuff. And I said, "I've got some stuff to play you." And I think he was dreading it, as most people, when your friends play you music. And I still get it now as a producer, when somebody says, "Oh, check what I've done," and I'm praying that it's good so I don't have to lie. And I played him some stuff that eventually ended up on Artificial Perfect, and he really liked it. And coincidentally, Rob and Monty couldn't do Jagged. I think Andy couldn't do Jagged, and so I was happy to be third choice. And he just gave me a go, with Scanner. That was from Jagged. That was the original track, and then gave me Before You Hate It and Halo, just to make sure it wasn't a fluke. And then I gave those back to him, and he loved them. And then that honestly was the start of everything.
And what was like? Was it quite a daunting prospect? Was it like an audition, or were you just excited to be working with him?
Oh, both. I mean, you can imagine kind of what it was like, mate. That first track, Scanner, when I sort of got back into my studio back in Nottingham and soloed his vocal in my studio, and I'm kind of like, how, Gary fucking Newman's voice. Do you know what I mean? Incredible,
Yeah.
Do you know what? I still get moments like that. I really do. I still have some fanboy moments, I'll tell you, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm proud of it, if he sends me something, I still just, I don't think to myself, fucking hell, it's Gary Newman's vocal anymore. But I do think to myself, fucking hell, he sounds amazing on that. We've just done, I'm sure you're going to ask me one of these as one of the questions, because just about every fan that gets in touch with me through social media or comments on something always says, "What the hell is happening with the re-records of Sacrifice, Exile and Pure?" They're all done. I will get onto your question, mate, but they're all done. So the most recent one that I finished was Exile. That was the one we had to finish.
Amazing.
And I was in LA, I don't know what it was, October, November, something like that. And we did all the vocals, and I got the vocals back. And so, obviously I'm editing them, listening for the best takes, all that kind of stuff. And on Prophecy, when he does his full-on Gary Numan voice, I'm like, mate, that sounds amazing. Absolutely brilliant. I write to him and say, those vocals are fantastic. So yeah, I do still get. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, well, I'm happy to talk about any aspect of it. But he, I think his voice. Talking about that, obviously he's got such a unique voice, but I feel like it's got, it's improved over the years the way he does it now.
Look, I mean, it's just different. Everybody's my voice is deeper than it used to be when I was a kid, or when he, Cars was what? How old was he? 19, 20. I mean, we can't expect anybody to still sound the same, but he still sounds like him. And when I first did Jagged, despite my inexperience at the time, first thing I wanted to do, because what I'd noticed with the way that he was mixing stuff was that he kind of buried his voice, and I just kind of I wanted to just take that and bring his voice front and center, and let's have his voice really exposed because it's an amazing voice. And that was kind of like what we tried to do. That didn't happen with Jagged, unfortunately, because Gary mixed that album. And at the time, as he says in his book, he was going through some hearing issues. Hence the reason that I've just redone Jagged as well. So that's now done as well. So I haven't, there's a little bit of new production on it, but it's basically, I've mixed it now. And, you know, everybody will be able to hear Jagged as it was intended to be heard in the first place. And I'm hoping that it might go up a little bit in your chart of top.
It deserves to be higher.
Quite disappointed.
Yeah, it definitely deserves to be higher. But yeah,
I was I'm hoping that, you know, when you hear it, as with the 3 dark albums as well, you know, Sacrifice, Exile and Pure, I'm hoping that, you know, you'll all kind of go, oh my God, it sounds exactly like the original, but you can hear everything. And that was the idea with those 3 albums, and now Jagged as well. I don't want them to be like Ade Fenton versions of those albums. That's not what it's supposed to be. You know, it's like, yes, we've re-recorded everything, but as an example, My Jesus from Pure sounds exactly like My Jesus from Pure, but it's like with Intruder style production. You know what I mean? And Intruder style sonic quality. That's always been the plan with it.
amazing. We'll definitely come back to that later on. But you mentioned Artificial Perfect as well, which was me and my mate Sam played a lot of that in our uni days. And obviously Gary sang on a few of those tracks at the time. And he said in the book that at that point you'd taken your production skills to another level by that point. And so was that for you a particularly great learning experience to sort of take on a project which was largely you on your own, or was it a very different thing?
I think as with everybody that makes music for a living, I can't even listen to it now.
Oh, really?
It's not. I did hear. I did a remix of the Leather Sea called the Suicide Mix, which I really wanted to be very based around the way dance sounds, and you know, with CR78s and everything. I did enjoy listening to that, but yeah, I can't really listen to it. But yes, I mean, I guess so. I think I remember hearing somebody say that I'd learnt on the job, which I think was meant as an insult to me, which is fine. You know, I don't mind that at all. You know, I can take it. But they were right, actually. You know, I was learning on the job. I imagine that all of the hardcore humanoids were kind of thinking, who the fuck is this? You know, techno. Why has he got a techno DJ involved? And rightly, of course, but you know, don't judge your book by its cover and all that. And you know, I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go back, or we wanted to go back to Jagged as well, is that, you know, because of Gary's hearing problems at the time, it's like it just could, the album can be a lot better than, because it wasn't mixed very well, you know, but now it's been mixed really well, and hopefully everyone's going to really enjoy that. But yeah, I did kind of learn on the job, and Artificial Perfect did take my production up to another level. But isn't that the same with any job? You know, you get better at it, don't you? You know, so even like Splinter, you know, which is not that long ago, you know, in terms of like, it's only, what is it, 2-3 albums ago that we did, and you know, I'm sure I would go back to that now and be able to improve it, you know, and just keep on improving like everybody does in their job.
Yeah, I think everyone can relate to that. Even, you know, if I listened to a couple of the early episodes of the podcast, I wouldn't do it like that now. So totally,
Exactly.
totally understand. But then in 2011 was obviously Dead Sun Rising, which is actually one of my favourite Numan albums. It's such an underrated gem, and I think reading in his autobiography again, it's fascinating to read that he wasn't necessarily interested in the project for a time, but how did that idea come about for you, and what was it like working on it in terms of
Um,
perhaps trying to convince him that they were all brilliant songs?
well, how it came about really was it was never meant to be
Mm.
an album, but he was everybody. You know, everybody always has to take in the sort of backstory with it. In that, at the time, he was going through quite a severe depression, and the antidepressants that he was on had kind of turned him into, not a zombie, because that's wrong, but he just didn't, he just wasn't bothered about anything really, and at the time I was managing him as well with Steve. And so as managers and obviously producer and bandmate and everything, you just kind of like, you want to, you know, it's been, what was it, 6 years from Dead Sun Rising, was it? Since Jagged, I don't know what it was exactly, but and we'd found these old songs on a hard drive and it was kind of like the songs that didn't make it onto Jagged, didn't make it onto Pure, and let's see if we can do something with them. The first track I did was The Fall. That was the first one I did. And it sounded absolutely nothing like his demo, nothing at all. And I just thought the actual vocal melody was exactly the same. I never touched that. The chord progressions were the same, all of that stuff. But it was kind of like, I'm going to show him that, what this song can be, and trying to get him excited. And I remember sat in their house in Waldron and playing him The Fall, and Gary just went, "Oh fuck," like that. And that moment was kind of like the spark where he started to get interested. The next one we did was For the Rest of My Life, and I think he was away with. He kind of went through this phase where he lost interest again because I don't know why, I can't remember, and he was on holiday with Gemma and the girls and heard Gemma playing For the Rest of My Life, my version of For the Rest of My Life, and he went, "What the fuck is this?" And she went, "It's you twat," It's like, do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's how that happened. And it was a case of like really getting him more interested. But once the spark was there with him, he really got into it. He really got into it. And I think we're both still really proud of that record, because it's quite experimental as well.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, I mean, the fact that he still does Resurrection, still does The Fall, so yeah, we're really pleased with it. I really like that album.
Yeah, and I feel like it's sort of, for me, it's sort of, that was kind of the start of this kind of continuous era of. I mean, he was already on a resurgence in terms of critical acclaim, but I feel like that was when it all kind of, people started really taking notice of him again. And I feel like it was every single album that's come out has just been better and better, and it's just been, and a really exciting era, I think.
Yeah, well, the key is that Dead Sun Rising was the first album that I didn't let him mix because of his hearing, and I just said, just give me a go. So I did it with Nathan Body, who's mixed everything that Gary's done alongside me, since then. And I think just the fact that you could actually hear everything that was happening because our ears were okay, and you could hear his voice really loudly again and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably why, to your ears and to a lot of people's, it's like that probably is the start of the resurgence. I think it's because you can hear everything that's going on again.
Definitely. And you mentioned Splinter as well, and I feel like there's songs on there that are so like epic, but yet rather beautiful. Like Shadow Falls on Me and The Calling. Did it sort of feel to you that you're on a roll by this point? It's like, right, we've got our process in order, and this is how we do it.
I mean, Splinter took a long time to do, but that was because he moved to Los Angeles during the making of it, so that was quite difficult. But yeah, absolutely. With Dead Sun Rising, kind of, I mean, it didn't have massive commercial success, but certainly critical acclaim, I think. And we definitely, everything felt natural. you know, at the time, of course, you've got to remember as well that I was managing him then and in the band, you know, producing, you know, almost burnt out, you know, it was hard. But again, you know, it was that. And then, you know, so that, I think it took about 18 months to finish Splinter. Savage only took 6 months. The latest one that I'll talk to you about that in a minute, but just as an example, you know, but Intruder took a long time because of COVID, and then this new one that was started is taking. It feels like it might take longer than we'd hoped. No particular reason. It's just, you know, Gary feels like it's a mountain to climb, and what part of my job as a friend as well as colleague is I need to help him up the mountain, up that first bit of the mountain, and sort of go, look, there's the top, and we can do it, and we can do it. We can get there, you know. And so that's always the case with him. Savage didn't happen actually. It was,
I mean,
you know, let's just go, and it just really quickly turned into something, you know.
But I suppose the start of any project like that, sometimes it's just like, you've got to get in the right mindset and you know, all that kind of stuff, and eventually get to a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he wrote honestly in his book how after Splinter, the two of you you essentially broke up your partnership for a couple of years, which I don't think a lot of fans even realised had happened. Did it feel like at the time that it had finished for good? Did you hope that at some point you'd be able to reconcile?
No, it did at the time. It was horrible, you know, for him and for me. I don't really. I've talked about it in interviews and stuff, particularly when Intruder and Savage came out, because obviously it was quite fresh when we got back together for Savage. But yeah, it felt at the time permanent. But it's mad, you know. We were just talking about this just recently. It's just mad that you sort of think back on it and you think, you know, what happened there? And I mean, you know, there was just there were just other factors at play, and timing, all sorts of different things. But now when we think about it, you know, it's bonkers, you know. And actually, I've got to say, actually, our friendship and our working relationship is probably stronger than it was then before that happened, you know. It's really, really strong.
Thankfully reunited in, I think it was 2016, which obviously very relieved at, because it obviously then led to Savage a year later, and to see that record, you know, reach number 2 in the UK charts. I mean, that must have been overwhelming.
Yeah. Honestly, you know, you've all seen the footage of Gary crying in the hotel room. I was, you know, the other side of the phone when that happened, you know, with Gemma, and it was incredible, you know, absolutely incredible. I just had a kid at the time, so we didn't know that it was going to be that, but we knew it was doing okay. So Gemma said, "Why don't you come down to this hotel, because we'll find out together what number it's going to be." And then it happened. So I got on a train, and then, you know, just found out it was number 2. Went into BMG's offices. They you know, it was almost like a guard of honor as we sort of went, you know what I mean? As we went into BMG and everybody's clapping. Gary made a bit of a speech to all the staff there and all that kind of stuff. It was so incredible. It was such a beautiful moment. And then within 2 hours, I was back home wiping shit off my little baby's arse.
Back down to earth.
Absolutely, back down to earth. Yeah, number 2 album in the chart, and like, you know, doing that. So
yeah, because I'm sure it's not all about. You're not doing it all for that kind of success. But when it does happen, when you're not expecting it necessarily, it must.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that it was Foo Fighters that kept us off number 1. You know, we were never going to beat that. But sometimes it's all about timing, you know. But then for Intruder to get to number 2 as well, you know, I mean, again, magic, you know, absolutely brilliant.
And I'm sure they just need to release it, because I think the second one's Olivia Rodrigo. So next time, make sure it's a week where there's not a big album out.
Really
We'll definitely do
difficult,
it.
because
But yeah,
everyone
in true,
release in the optimum time, sort
yes,
of between September and just before Christmas,
yeah,
or in spring. They're
yeah,
the kind of two optimal times, and everyone puts their albums out at the same time, so it is a really strategic thing.
yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, Intruder, another fantastic album. But for those who don't know, how does your process with work with Gary in terms of writing and producing songs? What does he send you, and how does a song begin forming?
Okay, just before I answer that question, just to dispel a myth, in that I sometimes I I find it incredible that somebody can make a comment on Gary's one of Gary's posts or something, and people will say, oh, he's got to get rid of Fenton, or this, that, or the other, or it all sounds the same, or what, all this crap, and it's fine, the fact that you feel so strongly about a singer's album that you want to slag them off. Those fans, I don't understand those fans, but the point, the reason it relates to this question is that my job is to do what Gary wants to do. I don't have the influence a lot of people think I do. What I do is, so Gary sends me a demo, and that demo will be drum grooves, vocals. The whole song is laid out, all the melodies, everything, most of the melodies, chord progression, a lot of sounds that he wants to use. And my job then is to kind of, one of two things. I might think to myself, fucking hell, this is in a really good state already. I need to start building it up and building it up. Talk to Gary, see what he wants, how he wants it to be, what he wants it to sound like. And then get all the musicians in that we use, record, make sure the vocals are recorded really well, and put it all together. The second thing that I sometimes do is, if he sends me something and I think maybe it can go a different direction, or the arrangement can be slightly different, or whatever, then I'll suggest something to him, and he'll just say, get on with it, and let's see what it sounds like. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that trust that we've kind of built up with one another, that if I'd have done that on Jagged, he probably would have thrown me out. You know what I mean? Because he didn't know who I was, and or rather, that was very early in our relationship. But it's happened so many times now that I don't mean I've changed his ideas. What I mean is that suggesting it goes in a slightly different direction has happened a lot of times, and not all. Sometimes he says yes, sometimes he says no. But his is the final answer on absolutely everything. He's just trusts me enough now to come up with some ideas that maybe he hadn't thought of, and that's why he enjoys working with me, because we have that way of working together, and there's just no egos involved. There's no bullshit with us. I think I've said before, on I Am Screaming. There's a bit at the end where I Am Screaming sort of is in three sections. You've got the sort of dance style, like CR78 stuff at the start. You've got the sort of halftime stuff, and then you've got the big tribal drums at the end. And the big tribal drums at the end, he was, he didn't feel like there was enough bass in it, and he was going, they fucking shit, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just going, it's fine, mate. We just put more bass in it. It's totally fine, And he's, but he's funny, and we just, that's what having a good working relationship and a good personal relationship always feels to me like. That's a good thing, and never negative, because there's just no ego,
No.
I can say, I think maybe that could be better, and he doesn't get upset about it. Or he can get annoyed with me about something, and I don't get upset about it, because we both want the same thing. We both want that album or that song to be as good as it can possibly be.
And is it normally say one song at a time kind of thing, or sometimes you have to have you got a bunch and you kind of dip
Well,
in and
again, it
out?
depends on the album. Savage, for example, was just, I couldn't keep up with how fast he was writing. It was incredible. It was brilliant. And then sometimes it's slow. It very much depends on the flow and whether he's kind of found his way yet, found a direction yet with the way it's going. I'm 2 songs into the new album. And at the moment we're in that phase where he sends me the demos, I come up with ideas, and then we talk a lot about, we want it to sound different to Savage. We want it to sound different to Intruder. So how do we kind of do that? Bearing in mind that Gary, very much likes that cinematic kind of sound. So it's kind of, okay, given the subject content of the new album, it's trying to find a way. So this is the bit that I really enjoy. Just before I spoke to you, I'm working on ideas for this song and on the new album, and I'll get all my gears singing and dancing and everything, and we just coming up with ideas, and eventually you come up with so many ideas that it finds its own kind of sound and finds a path, and then you go that one there. Sometimes we'll go back to the first song that we did and either scrap it or completely change it to sort of go with the way that the album's kind of developing and gone down that particular path. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen with this album as well.
Amazing. Well, we'll definitely come back to that as well. But in recent times, of course, Gary's daughters have appeared on stage with him and on some tracks, and this has led to Raven now making her own music with you. And so what has that whole experience been like, and when did that first come up as that this could be a thing that we should try?
With Raven, we were at I can't remember her name, but anyway, we were at someone's house in London somewhere, and I'd gone to visit Gary and Jim. They'd come over, had a business meeting or something. So I just I thought I'd go down and see him. So I drove down, and then they started talking about Raven. I didn't know anything about it, and they started talking about Raven working on some songs. And Raven was upstairs with the other girls, and they were like, "She daren't play them to you. She's she's too worried about playing them to you." And she came down, and she went, she got really angry, like not with me, but with them, just saying, don't you dare play them to them and all this kind of stuff. And I just had a little chat with her, and I just said, look, just send me one thing. Just send me one thing. Don't worry about it. We've known each other for your whole life, we're kind of almost family, you know what I mean? It's like, we're all really close. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And then she sent me my reflection. It was like, oh my God, I don't have to lie. Yeah. This is a friend sending me something that's really good.
Yeah.
So, so that she's just so talented, man. She's so brilliant in the studio. She nails the vocals so easily, so quickly. And her songwriting, considering it's the first kind of 15 songs that she's done, just incredible. So 6 have already come out. We've got another 9 songs that haven't seen the light of day yet, but we'll do soon. Again, it's all about placing within certain times in the year and all that kind of stuff with BMG. So yeah, that's another that was such a pleasure to work with her.
I think we've all been just impressed with what she's released so far, and look forward to the full album when it does come out.
Yeah,
absolutely. And going back to another project, you and Gary composed the From Inside soundtrack, and I know you've also produced film scores, including In the Company of Kings. And how does working on those sort of projects compare to making albums? Does it give you like a different kind of buzz almost?
100%. Sort of yeah, completely. Just because the reward is visual as well as as well as audio. So I mean, it kind of like rather than when you produce someone, your job is to give them what they want, and so in with the director, obviously it's completely different. It's a kind of different thing, and the music is kind of secondary, even though in the Company of Kings it kind of turned into quite a front and center kind of part of the film because it's a documentary, I guess. You're still elevating scenes or making the viewer feel a certain way. I was talking about this in another interview the other day, but there's a scene where Muhammad Ali's brother is feeling sad about not being able to talk to his brother, and some other boxers come to visit him, and it's uplifting at the same time as being tragic. So you imagine that as a brief for a scene. It's got to be uplifting, but it's also got to be. It's also really sad, and it's got to be tragic. So that's your challenge. And so when you nail it and when you get it right, and you see that with Rahman Ali, Muhammad Ali's brother, on scene in a car crying, that's brilliant. That is a buzz, yeah.
And I think, and Gary said in the past that he has been interested in composing, say, film scores. And I know I could totally imagine you two teaming up like a Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross type thing. So has that ever been an idea?
He's not that interested though, I mean, he doesn't really enjoy the processes as much as I do, I mean, I just love being in the studio, and I get up early in the morning. I get up this morning. I was up at 6:30 in the studio by 7:30. Been there since. I'll probably leave the studio about 8:30 tonight, 9 o'clock tonight, something like that. I just love being in there. It's just great. And that when you're doing a film, it's absolutely intense because the deadlines are usually stupid. So I don't particularly think that he would enjoy that side of it. I'd love us to do more stuff together like that, but I don't think it's something that he really wants to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we mentioned it earlier. Fans have been very excited about the release, the updates of Sacrifice, Exile, and Pure. When did that idea first come about? But also, what can fans expect? So they are complete reworks. They're not just like remixes.
So they are just. I know there's always. I think I might have even heard you say it on the podcast, but there's always people get confused, which is totally understandable. There's different things about the way music is made, and it's not a remix. It's a complete re-record, and so everything from vocals to guitar to drums, everything has been re-recorded, but it absolutely has to sound like the original. So my challenge was, how do I make My Jesus, for example, sound like exactly the same as My Jesus, but like it's super fucking quality, and that's what we did. So we just absolutely recorded everything. I can't even remember how. I think we were in LA, and I might have said, "Oh, it's a shame those albums, sort of sonically fantastic albums. Those three albums, I absolutely love them. Each one individually, for kind of what they are and what they mean. Sacrifice means a massive amount to a lot of Gary Numan fans, including me, because it was the turning point, wasn't it, from the middle years to the Gary we've got now. And I absolutely love that. However, the mix and also the recording was not particularly high quality, and so I think it just came. And then Exile, what an album! I didn't realize actually how fucking amazing it is until I only finished it like 3 weeks ago. Finished the mix on it three weeks ago, and I only kind of like realized how fucking good it is. I mean, I've always known it's a brilliant album, but when all of the sounds are jumping out of the speakers at you, you know, what an album! It's so brilliant. And then Pure is obviously incredible for a different reason. So we just decided that because of the sonic quality of those three albums, because of the mixing, we'd re-record them so the fans could hear them in glorious quality, really. And that's how it came about. It just takes a while. That when you consider that BMG are re-releasing, you know, Berserker and, you know, or the Middle Years albums and that kind of stuff, you know, can't just like dump everything out at once. You know, you can't even dump everything out like 1 week, then the next week, then the next week. Fans would love it, of course, but we've all only got so much money to buy this stuff. You know what I mean? So it has to be placed. So the re-records and the new version of the I don't even know what to call it, the newly mixed version of Jagged, you know, is all part of this next phase, as well as the new album and all the live albums that I've just mixed.
Yeah, but is it not frustrating necessarily, but is it weird for you when you've got a finished product? You'd love fans to hear it and everything, and it's sort of just sitting there waiting to go.
It's incredible. I would love nothing more than to play you a snippet right now, but I can't.
Damn it. And in terms of the new album, it's great to hear that there's already working on two tracks. Is there anything else in terms of like the kind of mood or the feeling that you can give away yet, or is it just too early?
No, because we're still in that phase.
Yeah.
You know, I think Gary said that. Has he already said what the subject matter is?
I don't know if he has. He might have mentioned it on his Patreon briefly, but no, not properly.
I don't know,
no,
but I think it's. I'm pretty sure he has. So AI is
yeah.
You know, sort of what I don't know if it's a theme as such, but it's certainly he's talked about that. So lyrically, so far, you know, there's definitely that connection. But in terms of like musically and everything where it's going at the moment, it's too early to say. Genuinely, you know, it's still in that thing where it's finding its path, and even the first things that we've been working on, I'm sure will get molded to when we finally decide what that sound is going to be. Very electronic, obviously.
Yeah, amazing. And then outside of Numan, are you working on anything else currently that people?
Well, actually, I've been working so much on, because you know, as well as the dark albums, you know, Sacrifice, Exile and Pure, and then I've done Jagged. I've also done the last 4 live albums as well, so I've mixed all of those. You know, that's a mammoth job, especially Wembley. You know, such a, you know, got to get it right. Such an important thing. It's such a beautiful show that I just took extra time on that just to make sure it sounds great. So I've been working on that, and then Raven, and then Gary's new album. So I have to be really careful about how I take on work, because I don't want to let anyone down, and I have to put Gary first.
Yeah.
And so I think the next thing that isn't Gary, provided the album is worked on, Gary's album is worked on in the sort of time frame that we're planning at the moment, is another a follow up to In the Company of Kings, that is at the moment called Fight Night Fever, but Steve's still working on that, I think. So yeah, I hope he's going to be next.
Well, there's a hell of a lot going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot to work on. Well, lastly for me, I thought it'd be interesting to, if you could pick, say, one Gary Numan track from before your time working with him, and then one track after, what would those 2 songs be?
That is an almost impossible question to answer. I mean, it's either going to be I Dream of Wires, or it's going to be Flow Car to China. Can I choose that? That's just ridiculous. or even Cry the Clock said. I mean, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to choose I Dream of Wires then, even though Dance is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
It still sounds incredible, by the way, Dance. You know, I'd still listen to it sometimes, and it's just genius.
I think it's had a bit of a recent resurgence, even among Numan fans. I feel like.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah,
I noticed that. It's always been for me. It's always been. It's just a work of art, absolute work of art. It is, you know, downward spiral quality. You know, in terms of like how important it is in my life, anyway. You know, and then from what we've done together, I don't know, different tracks for different reasons. My Name Is Ruin, obviously, sort of did really well, and it was an important sort of part of why Savage did what it did. But in terms of like musically, I think maybe Mercy would be right up there. The Gift would be right up there because of having Gorkum and Gazelle Twin on the record, and it just came together beautifully, that song. So yeah, they would probably be. I'm sorry, I can't narrow it down, but there are so you know, different things for different reasons, you know. And now I've started thinking about metal and all that kind of stuff because like I've left them out. It's impossible.
Well, we'll have to do a song ranking episode one day, and that'll be a nightmare. Yeah. Oh, well, that is about everything. So yeah, a huge thank you, Ade, for appearing on Electric Friend. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast. The songs and stories of a music icon.